call, Veronica?
Yes, I'm for the computer's preparing a live stream to YouTube, so I'm just going to talk for a second. Want to do it prematurely. We have another. Okay, so when I call your name, please unmute yourself and let me know you're here. Luz Martinez. Roseanne Ibarra. Lisa Judd.
Here.
Jackie Williams.
Here.
Sarah Martin or anyone else from Manzanita Services. Grace Peeler and any others from McCavan. Paul Davis.
Here.
Zenya Levacho. Karen Lovato, or any others from Health and Human Services Agency in Mendocino County. Blythe Post.
Here.
Amanda Archer or others from Mendocino County Youth Project. Judy Albert.
Here.
Camille Schrader or Sage Wolf.
We're both here. Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Who should I call on whenever we're doing voting? You or Paige?
Well, for today, it's me. It's fine.
Okay.
Just say RCS and one of us will do it.
Okay. Just makes it easier for later. Dan
Okay.
McIntyre.
Here.
Noble Waitlick.
Here.
Rachel McDavid. And Sandra Stolfi.
Here.
Any, okay, so Sarah McCormick or anyone from the city of Fort Bragg? Paul Anderson?
I'm here.
Hi. Elizabeth Elliott or anyone else from Northern Circle Indian Housing Authority? Jonathan Plank? Camille Leggett? Michelle Shaw or anyone else from Plowshares? Denise Gorney or anyone else from the State Council of Developmental Disabilities? And John Del Castillo or anyone else from Nation's Finest? Donald Damp? And that's all. So we have a board quorum of 9 and we have 10 full members present, but that requires a quorum of 14.
Okay, we just can't do any general membership stuff then, or any full membership stuff.
I just added Grace Peeler to the meeting.
Hey, Grace.
Hi, sorry I was late.
No worries.
I'll mark you here. We just finished attendance.
Okay, we'll move on to public comment. Is there any public comment?
I have one that I'm not sure if it's a public comment or an announcement, but so I'm just going to do it here, I guess. Building Bridges has has a review with the City of Ukiah Planning Commission on Wednesday, September 22nd. So this coming Wednesday and the Planning Commission starts at 6 p.m. I'm not exactly sure where on the agenda our item will be, but it'll probably be somewhere in the like 6:15 to 6:30 range in terms of when it starts. Anyway, so the Planning Commission will be looking at how Building Bridges, how our operations have been going for the last 6 months and giving some updates around kind of what the future will look like. There's some exciting things that are happening around places like Building Bridges with low barrier navigation centers being, there's new legislation, well, new as of July of 2019, California implemented legislation that allows low barrier navigation centers that meet certain criteria to be a use by right on any zone that allows for a multifamily dwelling to be built on it, which includes, in the city of Ukiah, it includes commercial zones, which is what we're in. And so what that means is that our major use permit under the city of Ukiah that we've had for the last 2 years in order to operate is will not be a requirement for operations at this point. And that our partnership with the city of Ukiah is just that, a partnership. And so we'll be talking more about that at the meeting, the Planning Commission meeting on Wednesday. So anybody who wants to come and support, that'd be wonderful.
Thank you, Sage. Okay, we can't approve the minutes for the membership meeting because we don't have a quorum. Was that a full membership in April? Veronica? Yes,
Yes, it was.
that's what I thought. Okay, we don't have the meeting minutes from August? No?
We did, but we have said that the board approves board meeting minutes and then full membership approves the full membership. So I didn't bring them or post
Okay.
them,
Okay,
but we'll have them next month.
all right. You want to introduce our guest, right, Veronica?
Yes. So Brian has been doing some research into various apps that are used for the point in time count to do data collection in the community. This was started by the state audit that the county had as the COC lead. It was a recommendation by them that we at least explore using a app in the field. Matt Simmons from Simtech Solutions, Inc. is here today to provide and show us a demo of their mobile app. They, I believe, are the mobile app provider for the Lake County COC, who I believe has used it in at least their most recent count. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Matt and let him do his presentation.
Well, thank you for the intro. I appreciate y'all taking the time to let me play some show and tell. Yeah, we have been supporting automated point-in-time data collection and reporting since 2000 and let's see, I do it backwards because my son's 8. So yeah, so it's 2013. Used to be in the paper world, supporting some communities in Massachusetts with their point-in-time counts, but also their HMIS system, and just realized it was just too much of a lift, and the data quality issues we were having. At the end of the day, we had to take the paper surveys and put them into a spreadsheet, and it was often up to myself or my colleagues to read people's handwriting. And that, interestingly enough, that was like one of the biggest hangups. Like, people just, handwriting is, we all type for a living, and it was really hard. That, and then people were just missing things altogether. You know, and by the time you got the paper stacks and had to go and enter the data in, it was too late to figure out, like, you know, to tell them like, oh, you're doing it wrong. And so we built a mobile app. I'm a developer and I work with developers, and we're like, well, why don't we just create something to fill that void and not do that again, you know, next year when it comes around. And so we did. And then fast forward another year, HUD got word of what we had done and said, we want that. And so that was pretty cool. And so, but the problem with HUD, which is the same problem we have, not the problem with HUD, the problem with HUD guidance and the legalese, is that fair housing law prevents us from hosting data if we're working with HUD. So, so that's the same deal with HMIS. Like, you know, people ask, like, why don't we have a one giant HMIS system we don't have to deal with anymore? And that's what it comes down to is with HMIS, HUD isn't hosting the data, so they can't discriminate based on the data. They're so it's an arm's length. So we built an app. Yeah, that, you know, we had the app, then when HUD looked at it and said, we want this, this, and this done, do it. We want to license your work, and we're going to make it better. So we field tested it. We said, oh, sure, that sounds great. You know, chance to work with a mothership. And we implemented in Boston, field tested in San Diego and LA and a couple other small communities, and had a couple of years with HUD. But the hang up of being detached from the data was too much of a lift for a lot of the communities that were trying to use the tech. They couldn't build their own database, and they didn't have the staffing to figure out how to hook up our app to their database, basically. So we parted ways amicably with HUD, and we retained intellectual property rights to our app and what was the HUD point in time counting tool. You know, we made some updates with, now we had, you know, full reign on how to do it, and could manage both sides of it. Now we have Counting Us, and the Counting Us app, which is, if you wanted to, you can play around, you know, try to break it kind of deal. So it's Counting Us. It's from the App Store, Google Play, or you can just go to the browser, your web browser, and go to counting.us. They all will lead to the same place, and I can walk you through it, but basically you'd register an account and put in a setup key, and that setup key ties the incoming survey data from the volunteers to your own database. And then, you know, I think maybe it would be a good time for me to start showing, but anyway, that's just wanted to just show you, like, tell you a little bit of the background. On the homeless side of things, so you understand, I've been working in the space since 2002. I built the first homeless data warehouse in the country, and the first prioritized by name list. So you probably hear about the prioritized by name list when you hear about community solutions or Built for Zero, or the VA has programs, you know, targeting on homeless veterans. They just announced I don't know if anyone was dialed in for the USICH and HUD. They just had a national release of their new plan, and I'm already drawing a blank on the name of it. Something like, let's see. Sorry, I've drawn a blank on it. It was pretty cool, but there's a lot of money coming from the feds and guidance and hopefully support for the work that we've all been trying to do for years. So that's exciting. So on that's a little bit of my background, but it's basically taking my technology and finance background lens to the work of homelessness. Without further ado, unless there's any questions, we can dive into it. I'll pause. All right. So I'm going to, if it's all right, I'll share my screen. Let me get the other screen going. I've got multiple monitors. Go ahead.
One question that I'm going to ask while you work on that is, we, as you may know, are in a very, very rural area, and connection to data access is really kind of spotty in some areas. Does your application allow for us to enter it without having a data connection and then upload it later when we do?
Yep.
Awesome.
It does. So that's called offline capabilities. It uses your local data storage. And that's a big difference between what's called a native app that you would download. So you do need internet access to actually download the app to begin with. But as long as you have that, you can go out into the field, do your thing. And one of the interesting things about cell signal versus satellite, from the vantage point of satellites, you can still get your GPS coordinates of where you are. So we can still capture the location of the interaction, even though we can't post that information back to the servers. So it would use local storage until you get back online. You'd say the information is draft. It would try to, when you go to submit, it would say, sorry, can't connect. Would you like to save this as a draft? And I can show you how that all works. And then you'd save it. And then when you get back to an area that has connectivity, you can fire off those surveys and it will remember the location of where you were, not where you are.
Awesome.
And
Even
you go to
better.
submit. Yeah. So yeah. All right. And that was all, again, that was a big part of the, because obviously from HUD's perspective, you're building something nationally. And it wasn't fair to the communities that don't have full cell coverage to have a tool that only some communities can use and others can't. So that was a big part of it. So yeah, let's share the screen and
Real
all right.
quick, for anyone
Sure.
who wants to download the app while we're going through this, there's instructions on page 9 of your agenda packet.
yeah, appreciate that. The instruction, I can actually throw up if I can put this over here too. So I'm actually in what's called an emulation mode. So it makes it look like what I have on the browser looks like a smartphone. And but if I go to pointtime.info, so it's not letting me do this. All right. Yeah. Trying to get out of this emulation mode. My apologies. But yeah, this instruction should be in the what you sent along. But again, it's just downloading. If you search for counting us, sorry, it's spelled counting.us in the browser. You should be able to find the app there. And then once you're done, once you've downloaded it, if you want, I can pause while you're looking for it. Really, it's the next step. I'll log out so you have a similar experience. You would tap register here, and once you tap register, you're just going to put in information about you as pretending you're a volunteer, and there's a different account. The same access that you would have if you're an administrator. We're using the same information, but it's a different login for managing the account. We do ask that people put their cell phone number, not their home line, their landline if they have one. Used to be more of an issue. Now a lot of people are starting to move away from landlines altogether. But if you have poor signaling, then there's more of a reason to have one. But that allows us to communicate with a volunteer during the count to say, hey, you're straying out of your region, or you forgot to put this person's gender. Do you remember what that was, or whatever it might be? So once that's done, you hit submit. And again, I already have an account, so I don't need to do that. And then I'm just going to I just did register again. Log in. And then from here, you might be prompted to something like join count. Now for me, I'm already joined to count. I'm already attached to the demo region, but this is where I would put in the setup key if I didn't have one. In this case, we'll use just the word demo. And this is, for your community. So if we wanted to say like, all right, the setup key is Mendocino, we could do that, or whatever you want it to be. Sometimes people use like a catchphrase, or like we all count with what we use in San Diego. Whatever you want, you can put in here. Sometimes it's just like the COC identifier and the year. So TX501 2021. But anyway, those are unique to you. And then once you hit join count, you're now associated with that count. Now, if we had region set up, and this is an optional feature. So we can break up a large landmass into smaller land masses, like smaller subgeographies, if you will. And then also have regional administration. So what that does is it allows you to have like, okay, here's our whole picture of what we need to canvas, but I just want, 6 people to each cover their own portion of the COC. And that's going to be their lens for the night. That's their responsibility. So what it does is it starts taking some people out of the street. They're normally doing counts. And you're saying, you know what, your job is administration. And actually, if you have people with, maybe mobility challenged, or they just, they don't feel comfortable participating in the count because of COVID or whatever it might be, this is a good job for someone that, doesn't want to be out there. It is technical, and you have some responsibilities. And sometimes it's a lot of times it's someone that already works for an organization. Maybe they have to staff a shelter, anyway, but it's kind of, after hours and it's quiet, they can do something like that. If you don't use region management, you wouldn't even see the screen. So I'm going to assign myself to the northern region. And I'm now counting for Demo region, which would be Mendocino, but the northern part of the Mendocino. So at this point, I tap get started. Now, for me, right now, the count is in test mode. And what that means is that you can bang away at this all you want. Nothing that you do is going to taint the results for the actual point in time count. So we can, use it for training, use it for testing. And one of the things that some communities actually do is they say, submit here's the video, here's a, getting started guide, submit a survey, and then we'll know you're good. If you can't get to that point, you're not ready to participate in the count. And it really is this far, and then you submit a survey and then you're done. So you can use that. Now, some of the surveys that we have here are for demo purposes. These are customizable, and one of the options is to have custom surveys and custom survey questions. Typically, the base offering, it's an unsheltered survey. A survey basically means that you have a chance to actually ask person questions, engage them. An observation tally, and for communities that a lot of times it's a hybrid, so they'll ask certain people questions, and maybe it's just outreach staff. Sometimes it's outreach staff plus some people that have done it before. Sometimes it's everyone. If you can interview someone, go ahead. We want you to interview them. But there's times when you can't get a hold of them. You can't interact with someone. So it's health and safety risk, a language barrier, a sobriety issue, whatever it might be. If you can't engage someone, then you kind of defer back to the observation tally. So these two right here kind of take the majority of your unsheltered count on. And then beyond that, if you have some providers that maybe they're not using HMIS, or you don't trust their HMIS data quality, there's a sheltered homeless survey as well that they can use. So it could be faith-based providers, sometimes there's missions, sometimes, every community is different. And then for this one, it actually mirrors the unsheltered survey, but the big difference is we set up we give you the ability to add your organizations and your projects, and, they'll be available from a drop-down, when someone hits that survey up. And then the family reunification survey, actually, I think you mentioned Lake County as, yeah, I'm gonna share this. I hope it doesn't mess up my screen when I do this. But yeah, Lake County, this is the best example of it. By adding this survey to their last year's point in time count, we were able to get Michael hooked up with his mom, who he hadn't seen in 30 years. And he's now living at home again. And he met his grandchildren for the first time. He's sober when he wasn't before. He's doing small engine repairs, and he's got a sense of purpose, and he's got people around him. And that's the family unification survey and the process. We have a partnership with Miracle Messages, which is in San Francisco. It's a nonprofit, and they work with people like Mark over here. He was a digital detective. And what we do is, if someone says during the point in time question, if you opt this in, do you have anyone in your life, family or friends, that you would like to be reunited with? If they say yes, then that triggers the other survey to happen. And then with consent, we share the information back with Miracle Messages. And then the detectives work to try to find that person. And if that person wants to be found, they facilitate a reunion like this one. So that's that piece. And I could throw that in the chat if you guys want to.
That's great.
Yeah, kind of cool, right? It just takes this whole thing away from just being a count exercise, which we know we have to do for the feds, to being one that we're helping people. And that's maybe I should have emphasized this, but yeah, that's why we got into this work, is to help people. And so, and beyond that, something, a conversation for another day, but we also have another sister app to this called Show the Way. And that's more for ongoing street outreach and the care coordination to build up those by name lists of people living on the streets, figuring out who's in what encampments. So you can have targeted housing focused remediation strategies versus the punitive criminalization of people that are lacking basic housing. So that's another core project that we work on that, we can spend more time another time, but the agenda item for today is this one over here. So yeah, on the survey, it really is pretty simple. We do support multilingual English or Spanish. If you do custom questions, the only thing that we ask is for help on translating them, because my Spanish is just really weak, and same with my team. We're not native speakers, and there's different dialects of Spanish too, and different ways to say things that if I put it in Google Translate, it may or may not come out to being something you want to say to someone, I guess. So if you did do the English survey, if someone's speaking English, then fine, and it will keep going from there. If I said Spanish, it would trigger the Spanish questions. It's all data driven. Next question is individual or household, and this could take a little training, like just teaching people like when you would ask which. But if it's a family, then and then say they're living in a car together, you would go with the household survey, and the difference being is when I ask for household, it's going to ask me how many people are in the same household sleeping in the same location. And so if I said 3, it's going to loop through the survey process 3 times. And that it's going to create what's called a household ID. So from a reporting perspective, when you go to generate that report for HUD, it's going to tie them together using the age composition and the family size to figure out what reporting bucket to put them in. So for the sake of demo, I'm just going to skip that one and go back to just this individual. You don't want to watch me loop through the same thing 3 times, I don't think. GPS enabled, like I mentioned, but when you're doing a demo, it's going to use the IP address of my computer. So I'm down here in San Diego. But if I wanted to move this, I could do that. If I was doing data entry after the fact, maybe there are some communities I work with where it's like, there's people like, we love paper and we want to stick with it. So like there's a few holdouts. And then for those people that love paper, then they have to build a paper form to emulate the same question and then enter the data in afterwards. And for those, we have a manual ability to manually enter the address of the nearest location to where the person was found. So that's, there's a workaround there. If I want to pan the map, I can do that. And same thing with my phone, just swiping on the map. It's like, maybe I capture everything in a conversational setting, and I knew enough of the person, or the location's a little off. I can move it as needed to pan the map. So I'm going to assume this is my location. To go with it, I'm going to say next step, and now I'm ready to go. It captured it. Now the interaction is starting to commence. First question: have you been interviewed today? If you say yes, it's thanks, you're done. We're all set, because we don't have double count. If no, then the next question really is, and these are all based on, so HUD has these mock surveys that Apps Associates, as the TA provider for HUD, created. And you're trying to just basically make sure that you're actually serving people that are literally homeless. So if I were to say a literal homeless location, it's going to keep going. But if I were to choose a location like emergency shelter, that's it. Because it's not that they're not literally homeless it's literally homeless on the streets, because emergency shelter, unless they're using the sheltered survey, the idea is that they're going to be counted at the shelter. So we don't want to count them twice. So, but let's say that's staying in a street or sidewalk. basic demographics, and these are all optional. I keep right clicking instead of left clicking. So, you know, the only thing that's non-optional is it goes back to that age determination. And for age, the reason why we need to know something along the age is really to delineate between children and adults. Because if we don't have that, we can't do the household composition.
Hey, Matt?
So, yeah, go ahead.
Some of these items that are like a HUD given, I know that we have to collect it in, like, because we have to enter it into their system in the method and using the like drop down list that they give to us. But like HUD is expanding their definition of gender come October. So I'm wondering if it's going to be different than what it is now.
Yeah.
Do we have the ability to change some of those if we need to?
If HUD changes, which basically with gender, the way they did, that's a really good question. If they change for the guidance for the point in time to reflect the changes to the HUD data standards, then what is now a drop down will become a check, like more of what we do for race and multiracial. Because so just for those that aren't aware, to that point, you're currently up until, you know, even the current guidance, we don't have new guidance for 2022 yet. You're supposed to choose a gender, and for race you can be multiracial, so you can, you know, check away, and that will count you as both, and then also in the multiracial category. But for gender, the current option is like, you know, pick one. And then two of them are don't know, refuse, and probably some of those are ones that people may identify in more than one. So, you know, the new reporting guidance is data collection guidance for the HUD data standards is to be able to support kind of more of a multi-check. So as soon as we get guidance from HUD, if we have to switch this around, we will. And then all the reporting will follow suit. That's a really good question though. And I hope HUD does us all a solid this year and doesn't wait till at the end to give us guidance, but we'll see. So, oh yeah, so if I did my date of birth here, this is like those widgets. So if I chose this, it would automatically take care of the next question, just to share that. If I skip this one and did age, it would automatically take care of the next one. So they're grayed out. You can see them, and if I change them, it'll update again. But the point is, we need at least age range to do that household composition piece. And then all these other questions to be relatively familiar, more demographics, and then this goes into the chronic homeless determination. So, you know, you're looking at experience with homelessness. If I say yes, I don't have to ask, have you, you know, about the other instances. I say no. You know, how many times, how long. So in this case, for the chronic, it's looking for 4 more episodes over the past 3 years, or 1 episode of greater than a year. So again, that plus the presence of a failing condition and being an adult qualifies you as chronically homeless. So we don't ask, are you chronically homeless, and leave it up to the volunteer to be able to know what I just said. You know, we derive it based on the questions. Some of these are not required. One of the things to share, you know, so like the natural disaster one, you know, we can tease out more details here. You know, add fires, but I know, like for example, for your area, you know, you're more prone to fire, unfortunately. Down in Texas, we have hurricanes. The same with Florida. But with FEMA dollars and FEMA reimbursement, sometimes it's worth knowing that, and also being able to, you know, if you wanted to make the case that, you know, say you're doing a great job ending homelessness, and all of a sudden, you know, a tragic event happens. I don't wish that on anyone, but if that does happen, that disruptor skews your data and skews your trends, and it's not your fault. So, but it's also a chance to go back to the feds and the state and say, we need more resources here. You know, and that sometimes it's not your community. You're actually sometimes in your community, it might actually go down because there's no housing supports locally. Even though you're the one that had the wildfire, it's going to be the veteran community that takes the hit. So where Texas is an example, when Hurricane Harvey hit, we worked with most of the regions in Texas. We were able to show the ripple effect of the hurricane that really hit the coast, but the reaction to it, like the spillover, if you will, it was statewide, and that helped them to understand that the continuum of care is kind of artificial in some regards. Like people don't stop at the COC boundaries; they keep going.
We actually experienced that fairly recently here locally whenever we had a FEMA emergency housing project from the fires that happened.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times people were from Lake County, and but the shelter was, not the shelter, but the facility that FEMA was operating for them was over here. And so we had to include it in our transitional housing in our plan count and our HIC. So
Right.
Both reports were affected by this, project that was created because of the wildfires.
Yeah.
And it was around for over 2 years.
Okay. Yeah. And then so if say for example too, you go to do your LSA, used to be AHAR, and maybe you don't have great data quality for that program because you stood it up so quickly in response to an emergency, to be able to say, this is the impact, this is why we did this. And, you can, in the comment section, when you go to do your NOFO or, your LSA, you can kind of make the argument like, hey, we're helping other people too. It's not just, our own, which I know a lot of communities that does that lens. And on our own lens too, we do ask about this last permanent address of, where someone was when they became homeless. And this one's a research opportunity. We work with a couple of researchers, Dan Treglia, he's a professor at UPenn, as well as Dennis Colhane, who's also a professor at UPenn. And now that we have geospatial data of where the interaction is taking place, which is what we have with the first map I showed you, is intriguing. But what it doesn't tell you is where someone came from, and if there's magnets, like service magnets, that are drawing people out from elsewhere. And with a NIMBYism, that tends to be a big part of the conversation. Like, oh, we don't want permanent supportive housing in our community because we don't have that. We did everything we're supposed to, and it's not our fault. Well, to be able to make an educated, case that's saying, actually, we have people from your community that became homeless, and we need to scatter our sites throughout the whole continuum of care and not just lump them all in the one corner. So it's beyond that. We can actually, it's for housing placement, but it's also looking upstream at now with this type of geospatial data to say, using census data, which is also geospatial, we can look at other attributes about a neighborhood and start leaning in to figure out if there's causality between things like school funding and zoning laws and whatever it might be that's geospatial, to say, is there a corollary there? And then the other thing that is also intriguing and we need to do more of is racial disparity analysis. Well, in order to do that, you need to compare your homeless population to prevalence rates to your general population. And your general population really should be about the population of, where people came from too, to see if certain people are being underserved by the same tax dollars. So this is optional, and but again, these are just kind of bring them in here as some best practices. I mean, the fact that we've worked with, probably over 60 communities so far supporting their point in time count. Over 25% of the geography of the continental U.S. uses, or has used our tech. We get ideas that go beyond what HUD wants from them, and that's part of working with us. Is you have an idea of like, oh wow, I didn't think of that, and maybe we do want to look at that. And you'll have your own ideas maybe that other people would be interested in learning from. But then once we gather the data together, we can start having a decent sample size to do research with it. De-identified data, absolutely. But, homelessness as a direct result of COVID. I mean, that one is tricky, but, because it's new, we also don't know how to word that properly in the best way. So right now it's a blanket statement, but there's a lot of nuanced gray areas to things like that. The same thing with natural disaster. Did your house burn down, or did you lose your job because of it? Or was it something totally different? The economy, just tanked, and I don't know. There's different ways it can go out. It's not like a hard and fast yes or no for some people, but we can work together to try to get it tighter for research purposes, and at least get something to glean and support conversation. And that's part of what you use data for. Ideally, is you're using it's actionable intelligence that's gathered to support your goal. And so if you have enough that you can work off of, then we can help support your goal. These other questions, go ahead.
We're kind of running a little short on time today.
Okay, my apologies. They're probably going along too.
That's okay. But I just thought maybe we could see if anybody has any questions.
I do.
Okay.
I was wondering, what platforms is this available on?
So it's any Android or Apple device. So, as far as the hardware goes, it's anything that runs Android or the Apple iOS.
Okay, so you wouldn't be able to use a Windows tablet with this, or no?
Most Windows tablets are compatible. As far as that goes, it goes back to, see, I'm firing this up right now from counting.us. So you can use a tablet as long as internet connected.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
So I'm going to submit the survey right now. This is where you would save it for draft. If I didn't have internet connectivity, it would tell me to save it. Actually, I'll just save it real quick. And then you'll see that through that draft window. So that little red number 1 tells me I've got a survey saved in draft. And I could go back in later on, open this up, scroll down. Maybe I need to fill something else out, and then submit it. So that survey is done. And then the command center is where we receive it, where you see the reporting side of it. I can go show that, but if any other questions too, now's not a bad time.
I know you've been really involved, and Judy, I know that you're kind of new to this last year. You guys got really tight with your surveys, and I just wonder, if you have any thoughts about this, or any impressions, concerns, or questions. Any other providers, especially?
No.
Okay.
This is Sandra from VA. I have used that when I complete for the point I in Lake County, and it was really user friendly. Yeah, it was really good. And the important thing is that you get the information right away. So yeah, so it was really helpful.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad there's someone that, I don't just speak, it's tough because it's like you're trying to guide people towards using something. It's great that you had the experience and firsthand, because in our world, there's salesmen, and you try not to be a salesman. You want to, help the cause. That's the nature of the beast. We're a mission-driven for-profit. So to have it come from someone else that's actually used it, that means a lot. So thank you.
Sage, your hand is up.
Yeah, my question might be actually maybe more for Brian than for Matt. I'm wondering, so I'm imagining that this comes with a cost, right? That there's a cost to use it. So my question is, we would, instead of paying for staff time, it sounds like this would help pay for like staff time needing to enter the data into our system and get it all, the reports all repaired. This would help streamline that process. So is that, Brian, do you see this as a tool for the HMIS lead and the point in time committee to use that would really help streamline our process and make it easier for us to get our point in time reports?
I definitely think so. We know how much time Gary used to spend kind of single-handedly going through every point in time survey and putting it into an actual format. What this also does is give us something we've been asked for a lot and we've never quite delivered, and that's in what district are people experiencing homelessness, in what city and what community. We're going to get a GPS map that shows the locations of homeless encampments. You can bridge that GPS data to county GIS to do reporting for Board of Supervisors for natural disasters. So it's going to cut down significantly on the back end time. It's going to be far more accurate because it's a lot harder to make mistakes when you have an automated process that reminds you you're missing data. And you can control it live as people are collecting it. You can have an admin following up and saying, hey, you missed this. Do you remember what it is? Can you put it back in? Mm-hmm. And the cost, I believe our estimate for a basic suite was like under $6,000. It's not really huge.
Seems like money well spent to make our lives easier, also have accurate data and possibly even get reports out sooner so we're not waiting so long after the point in time count to get information. I
think the report would come weeks, if not a month or two sooner using this. It's all automated.
Sounds wonderful. As someone who's had to do these surveys and been involved in the point in time count here, this would make a huge difference in our, make our jobs easier. Yes, please.
Nice.
Brian, did you have something else to add?
Two questions for Matt. One, how easy is it to export GPS data to maybe bridge with the county GIS, graphic information system? And two, just to verify, if you're running a shelter that's not using HMIS, there's a desktop portal. So if you want to put in all your shelter people, you're not using HMIS, you can still sit down in the desktop. You don't have to download the app. I believe that's correct.
Yeah, you got them both. The export function's right here. I can do subset, I can do the whole thing. I can customize the export. I could do filtered records to do the whole thing, but that has the GPS coordinates in it. And then on the reporting side, I was just showing it's really easy to create a report. I can run a report off of subgeography. I can do it with demographic extrapolation and save that tool. So people, you only have half the gender responses, for example. I can derive the other half from the data that is gathered. I can filter by region geographies, census tract, zip codes, etc. And then I can, from that, produce the point in time report just for that sub-region. Or I can do a point in time report off of a filtered data set. So I just want to show, just run a point in time report just for people that are 18 to 24 years old, because I have a wide CP project that I want to apply for, or I have a youth subcommittee meeting coming up, or maybe I've got some VASH vouchers coming up and I want to run something for just for the vets. I can apply those filters and the numbers change. And I can run a report just for that. Integrated region management, integrated count team management. So I set up the North region here. So I can subset,
Yeah,
yours.
we have our county split into 3 regions: coastal, northern inland, and southern inland. So we would definitely want to utilize that part of the function.
Okay.
And we kind of have it mapped out what those regions look like, especially our coast. Paul's always really on top of that. Brian?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, not Sage either. Okay, back to Matt.
Nice.
Or do we have any other questions?
So the other piece
Well-
I forgot to mention was we have volunteer registration can be tied into it too. So like once you have if you wanted to recruit volunteers, you can set your regions up. They can choose which region they want to apply to be part of. And you can set your teams up to say, I'm going to put these people on this team. Maybe you want to have balancing between, police and, clinicians and people who've done it before versus people that are totally new to the count. So that's another option just while we're talking things through. So that
You're
would,
talking my language right there. That's very exciting for me because we're always really low on volunteers. And a lot of times we hear, well, I didn't know how to sign up. And the person, our main point of contact has switched to another department. So that's going to be huge.
nice. Yeah.
Okay, I think that we're just about out of time. But unless there's anybody else that has any other questions or comments, if you want to, I don't know if you have any final thoughts, Matt.
No, I appreciate you taking the time to let me show you what we have. If anyone wants to reach out to another region in California or beyond, I can happy to put people in touch. We can do a follow on, whatever makes you comfortable. We're here. I'm in the same time zone too, so you don't have to worry about what time you call me.
Okay.
But otherwise, I
Thank you.
appreciate you taking the time, and I'll be here if you have any follow-on questions. How about that?
Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate it.
All right. Y'all take care.
We're gonna move on to reports and presentations. During that, nobody else showed up that I saw, right, Veronica?
I don't think so.
Okay,
Oh, wait, yes. Karen Lovato joined us.
but we're not to 14 though.
No.
Okay. Is there an update from Karen from the County of Mendocino or Megan?
Start with Karen.
I'm so sorry. I'm jumping on from another meeting. I do not have anything at the moment.
Okay.
Megan, do you have anything? Okay, we're gonna move on to the city of Ukiah. Noble, do you have an update for the city?
Yeah, good afternoon. No, I don't have anything new at this time. Everything's been status quo, so thank you.
Thanks, Noble.
Hey, Dan, I'm sorry. I was distracted on a call and wasn't listening at all. Did you do the county update?
Yeah, I was waiting. Yeah, did you have anything for county update?
I did want to add something really quickly, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Our project Room Key. So Room Key is not Home Key. Room Key is the FEMA supported project of housing vulnerable individuals in motel rooms during the pandemic. I did want to let people know that we recently we kind of opened up a few more slots and added some more folks. That happened very quickly. So we were prioritizing families and people that were very unwell. So we do have a tiny bit of room left in that program, but probably going to shut it down again. But what we're trying to do is a process of 2 for 1. Like if 2 people exit to housing or a stable place, we would open up another room. So we're sort of heading in the right direction, but also leaving some more room for that. Along with that same project, we have been authorized for a fairly large chunk of money that will provide every individual that's in Project Room Key access to funding, a $5,000 fund, not to them personally, but that can help them become rehoused. So we're excited about that as well, and looking forward to kind of the active participation of all of the housing navigators that are already working with our Project Room Key people and really aggressively finding places for them to be other than the streets when they exit Project Room Key. One other really quick update, I just did learn today that we did get authorization for the CDBG funding to pay for phase 2 of Live Oak Apartments. So that's super exciting. That had been what we had been waiting for. The bid package for the construction people to finish the remodel, putting the rest of the kitchenettes in, will probably go out now in the next couple weeks. And we'll probably be ready for our second wave of residents. Best case scenario, December, but could be more like January. So I will, as we get closer to that, I'll be working with the community to get ready for that next batch of new residents at Live Oak Apartments. That's all I have.
Thank you, Megan. Any
Thanks.
questions for Megan? Okay, now we're going to go on to Paul from Point Arena. Do you have an update?
Yeah, I just have to get it unmuted there. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Not much to report. The city council did approve a resolution for a designated spot for people living in vehicles to sleep overnight. It's proposed at the City Hall Veterans Building. The county owns this building, so we would have to clear it through them. We'd also have to clear it with our risk manager, and most importantly, we need an organization to staff it. We don't want to just have a open field for people to just show up and do whatever. It would have to be managed in some way. We're looking for a community organization or a church or something in our area to manage that, and we don't really have that much available out here. So that's kind of been the drawback of moving forward, but I know the council is interested in making this happen. It's just the everything to get it to happen is the issue. So if there are any suggestions for on the coast, people who might be interested in doing a program, which would be a general program, rules, regulations, check in, check out, trash, restrooms available, that type of thing.
Okay, thank you for the update, Paul. Is there any other updates from any of the local jurisdictions that I missed? Nope. We're going to go on to standing committee reports. I don't have an update for the strategic plan because I was not here. I was on vacation. Megan, do you?
Dan?
Yes.
Before we go to the committees, I wondered if Emily Tecchio from Assemblymember Wood's office might want to provide any updates. I think that this is her first meeting and she had muted her own phone. So Emily, do you have anything you want to provide or update us on?
I don't have any prepared updates, but I am glad to be coming back to these meetings. And if there's anything that you would like to request of me, please do. Thanks.
So maybe back to the strategic planning committee, Dan.
Yeah, Megan.
Just super briefly, that you weren't there. I guess you weren't there, Dan. Okay.
No, it's not.
We had a really helpful strategic planning committee meeting. Some of the items we were unable to actually reach a conclusion to, we will be discussing today. But just as an FYI to the group, we are contracting with Mari Roden to work on an update to the strategic plan because it's been over a year and we haven't really cataloged what we've done and just kind of refined it. So she will be reaching out probably to most of you sometime in the near future to do interviews to gather information to kind of update our draft and add things and have a status report. So that will be coming in the next month or two. And that was per the direction of the strategic planning committee.
Okay.
I'm reviewing my minutes from that meeting. The strategic planning committee also discussed, which is a later agenda item regarding the California State Auditor's recommendation to have additional board seats. So the strategic planning committee didn't really have any ideas or suggestions. And they did not feel they had enough information or representation to make a recommendation and directed us to bring the topic to this meeting. So the other item was regarding HAP round 3 funding allocations. They've been announced. And so we talked about how the ACT team, myself and Megan, would be working on those applications, and we talked about the need for a collaborative work group between the county and the COC to collaborate and coordinate their HAP multiple rounds of funding. And so We're going to be working back with the COC co-chairs and the county, Becky Emery, the social services branch director, and possibly the county CEO's office to kind of explore that. And that's what I'm, yeah.
Is there any updates for Shelters and Solutions?
Angelica reached out to me today. She said she could not be here, but had no updates.
Okay, thank you. Sage, do you have anything on coordinated entry discharge planning, or Brian?
I'm sure. Coordinated Entry Committee has been working hard. Coordinated Entry Discharge Planning Committee has been working hard at doing updates to our coordinated entry process and to expand our prioritization for coordinated entry resources. When COVID-19 started in March of 2020, we followed the recommendations of HUD and very quickly changed our coordinated entry prioritization to prioritize those housing resources for people who had risk factors associated with health complications if they got the virus. And so now that we're, a year and a half into this pandemic, the committee has really found it's time to open up our prioritization and be able to prioritize people who may not have the COVID-19 risk factors, though those will still be, considered as part of the prioritization. So we have implemented a updated screening process that includes the VI-SPDAT, the Vulnerability Index Service Prioritization Decision Assistance Tool. So the VI-SPDAT, it's a standardized set of questions. We've used it for years for our coordinated entry prioritization. We've also, so that is being implemented again. For those who aren't familiar, it's a series of questions that helps identify levels of risk to people out on the street. So it looks at length of time homeless, that where specifically do they sleep? Like, are they in a shelter or are they on the street? If they're on the street, they're at higher risk than somebody who's staying in the shelter, for example. Interactions with law enforcement, frequency of visits to the emergency room, medical conditions, physical disabilities, mental illness, substance abuse, trauma experience, access to resources. So it looks at all of these different factors to help us, and we use that information to help identify who's potentially more at risk on the street than somebody else. So that when we're allocating resources, we can use that information to make some informed decisions about where to allocate resources. So the other thing that the committee did with that prioritization, though, is for the first time, we've added in some local factors to the prioritization for coordinated entry housing resources. And so with the VI-SPDAT, you get points depending on your situation. And the local prioritization elements that we've included will also give additional points. And so those factors that we're going to be looking at are people who are older than 55 years old, households whose head of household, individuals or households whose head of household is between the ages of 16 and 24. So we're looking at having resources, also our TAY population be considered in prioritization. People whose domestic violence situation is contributing to their homelessness, veterans, families with children. Sorry, it's not in front of me. Veterans, families with, and people whose history of eviction would jeopardize their ability to obtain housing. So those additional factors are going to be looked at for prioritizing coordinated entry housing resources in our community. If anybody is interested in being part of the conversation at the Coordinated Entry Discharge Planning Committee, we meet on the first Thursday of every month from 9 to 10:30, and I'm happy to send you an email. It is posted publicly. There you go.
Thank you, Sage.
Megan, you look like you have a question. Oh, okay, wait. Oh, there is one more thing then. Dan, at our last meeting, and I don't know if you were here, we had asked if the strategic planning committee or this board would look at the coordinated entry discharge planning committee. We aren't really able to dig into discharge planning as much as we'd like. And we would like the board to either give us direction as a committee to, because coordinated entry just continuously needs so much work. Like it's a big effort to keep coordinated entry moving and to do the updates that are needed and stay on top of it. And so we don't see a time in the next year where we're going to really be able to give the kind of attention to discharge planning that it might deserve. And so the committee's recommendation to the board is to either identify a separate committee that can take on that work and people who would be willing to be on that committee, or to just acknowledge and be okay that it's lying on the ground with the currently. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I would like to say, I think it's pretty important that if the work's not being done, which I completely understand why, Sage, and totally agree, we should take it off the title of the committee, because sometimes when something's holding space for something, it actually gets in the way of progress if that container is not actually able to do it. So I would recommend, I'm thinking though, it's not an action item, Dan, so I don't know if we could do it right now.
Can't
We
do it
probably
right
can't.
now, no.
Okay, but let's make sure we remember that for a future meeting.
Okay, it would require an update to the governance charter, which would require a full membership update, but we can totally do that.
Okay.
That would be really helpful, because I think that it's kind of, every time we see it on the agenda, I don't know about everybody else on the committee, every time as the chair or co-chair of the coordinated entry discharge planning committee, every time I make the agenda and I see it, it's a kick to myself, really, feeling like I'm not facilitating this properly. And it isn't that, anyway, we can only do so much. And discharge planning absolutely needs more attention, and we should be more intentional about how we do discharge planning and all of that. And having it in the coordinated entry committee at this time is not doing it any service.
I agree, Sage. And I also think that if we went down the other path, because we've done this silly thing before, where we say, oh, we're going to start a new team, and then we come after the same specialists that are working on what you're working on right now. So, this is just the result of, we have very limited specialized knowledge in these areas. And so I agree, we don't want to set teams up to have them feeling like they're falling behind. We should prioritize our work and do the best we can on the prioritized items, and know that that's second tier right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Sage?
Maybe not for Sage, but on the topic of discharge planning, I know the Shelter and Solutions Committee has explored that topic before, and I wonder if they would be willing to take that on, or if we should create a different committee. I know we don't have to discuss it today, but just thoughts I have on how to move forward.
Okay, we can add that to the agenda next week or next month. Membership committee, Veronica?
I haven't had an opportunity to convene it, and so I don't really have any updates. And we haven't had any new members place membership recently.
Okay. Brian, an update on the HMIS?
Sure. We did not meet at the last meeting. It was postponed. The chair was out sick and there was no urgent business. I can give a brief update on the HUD data changes that are coming this fall, pretty quickly down the pipe. Some pretty significant changes. A lot of it is just a nomenclature in changing our language to be more trauma informed and to use more appropriate language. For example, for ethnicity, it's now, instead of just Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latinx. Substance abuse problem is now going to be called substance abuse disorder. Same for alcohol abuse problem. So they're making some really intentional language changes to really just be more trauma informed and give client options. A lot of the racial language is changing. So instead of maybe Asian, now you've got Asian or Asian American. So it's opening up different languages to allow for clients to define themselves on their own standards. And there's a very significant change to gender. It's no longer choose one of these. It's going to be male, female, transgender, questioning, gender nonconforming, and you can choose as many as you want. If you identify, however you identify, it's now just like racial, you choose what you identify as. So you're no longer, if someone identifies solely as transgender, but not male or female, you're not shoehorning them into this male or female HUD definition that's existed till now. So they're making some significant steps forward in being kind of more inclusive. There's also some changes to our permanent supportive housing projects. They're going to be required at intake, update, and assess and exit to ask client well-being questions like client resiliency questions. And I won't get into all of them, but it's a significant change, and that HUD is now looking at HUD-funded projects through the COC. And that you're not only collecting data that's very specific and very quantitative, it's, you know, where are you living, where is your exit, but these qualitative questions that you have to ask the client about their own well-being, their resiliency, how they're doing. There's about 5 or 6 questions. They're starting with permanent supportive housing, and that's COC funded, but we'll probably move into all HUD projects eventually is what they're hoping to do with it, to start getting a better picture of how clients report and feel they're doing, more than just the data of where they're staying and when they left and when they got back into the program. That sums up those data changes.
That'll be interesting from a fair housing standpoint. Any questions for Brian? No questions for Brian. Ad hoc committee report, Lisa or Brian, is there an update on this?
I think the ad hoc committee is pretty much done. It's filled its purpose. And if I'm speaking out of turn, the MOU was established and the assessment was established. I don't believe the ad hoc committee is planning to meet again or do any further work.
All right, thanks.
That's correct, yeah.
I have a comment, or I'd like to share just some feedback that has come and that we talked about at our housing navigation meeting about how the selection process has gone for, not selection, but the wait list process has gone, and just around the time stamping, because on CDC's end, they opened the wait list and the case managers made referrals, and they are now going through those referrals based on when they were submitted along with their preference points, right? And so what we found, though, is that the housing navigators or the case managers that made referrals were not necessarily very thoughtful or consistent between agencies or between housing navigators about how they decided which referral to send over first. And so like some housing navigators sent over all of the referrals in a big bucket, like attached to one email, and some of them sent over. So that means like everybody who got sent over in that one email would be timestamped 801. Whereas other housing navigators sent their referrals over one at a time. And so doing like 801 was one referral, 802 was another for referral, 803 was another referral. So they weren't very thoughtful about, and there wasn't consistency across how people made their referrals. So there's been a request to be able to, in the future, or if we can look at how that big referral dump can happen at the beginning, so that it's more equitable and not just up to some arbitrary dump, right? Like if you're like, we got those 200 to 250 referrals in the first day, or in the first couple of days. And so it was just essentially a referral dump. And that in the future, if we can be just more thoughtful about what that initial dump looks like.
I think it's something that we can look at, and maybe it's a learning curve. So we're definitely using the preferences, and we have to have a secondary. So if we have so many people with the same exact score, there has to be a date timestamp is something that we have to regulatory use. But maybe we can do a little bit more conversation about that before it happens. And we are looking at doing a second poll. So I know that many people were disappointed that some of their people weren't pulled. And we just want to also remind everyone that there will be other polls. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's just a learning thing for when we do this in the future, when we're implementing a new program, which with the kinds of funds that come through, right? And we might be doing again, who knows? that it's something to learn from, and that maybe on the coordinated and like there's some ideas around how we could use coordinated entry to help that flow into the CDC referrals so that they're not necessarily all getting dumped in at once, but that the coordinated entry committee is prioritizing how they do the referrals in a tiered way. Anyway, so there's lots of ideas for how we could shake it up and do it a little differently next time. So it's not just based off of like who the case manager or happens to scan first and send in.
Okay, thank you, Sage.
Thanks, Sage.
We can't do anything on the next item because we don't have a quorum. So Veronica, do you want to give an update on COC HUD funding?
Can I pause there for a second, Dan, before we jump to that? So are we just are we just punting this conversation on F1?
We can't take action because we don't have a quorum.
Okay.
I mean, we could sit here and discuss.
I'd like to have the discussion if we could, because it's part of the state auditors.
Well, I understand, but a discussion we can't take an action on is not going to help the state auditors.
But do we don't have a quorum. I'm sorry. I sorry to derail this, but we don't have a quorum of the board.
The general membership who votes on the governance charters.
And so we'd have to have this conversation twice, right? We would discuss it now, and then we'd have to discuss it again when we have a quorum.
Well,
okay.
And we've already discussed it once, so at the strategic planning committee. So is that the thought? Let's not talk about it 3 times?
Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking?
That's what I'm thinking. If we can't vote on it or do anything about it, we might as well just table it till we can.
Yeah, we can't do anything about it because we don't have a quorum. I mean, we can discuss it. I have no problem with that, but we're going to be discussing something that's probably going to take some time that we can't do anything with.
Okay. I guess I just want to, I have an ask of those who are present and anyone who's watching this after the fact to think about possible additional board seats that we could potentially add. So if you could just kind of have that rattling around in your head. Thanks.
Okay.
So you want me to go on to funding?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have 2 big pieces to share, and they're very similar. Both the HUD Continuum of Care 2021 Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, HUD changed it this year, as well as the State's Emergency Solutions Balance of State 2021 Notice of Funding Availability, or NOFA. They've both been released. The COC timeline, that grant application is due by November 16th, 2021, and the ESG Balance of State applications are due by October 19th, 2021. So I'm requesting that the board co-chairs establish either a funding review committee for both funding sources, or 2 separate and ad hoc committees to come up to review the applications and create the policies and procedures and things like that. I've included a handout that has the Mendocino County 2021 award amounts for both the COC and ESG. ESG was harder, so it's just the whole state from a region, but the COC is just Mendocino. The application process for the Continuum of Care program is the same as it has in the past, as it will be done through eSNAPs. But this year, the state HCD application process for ESG has changed. It will be an electronic application for the first time ever. We don't have to have all of those multiple binders and thumb drives and all of that stuff. So it'll be through the state's e-civis portal. And there's a link to it on the page that I've linked here. That's what I have for both the continuum of care and ESG, balance of state.
Sage,
So I'm not sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So for ESG, typically in the past we've had it go through the ad hoc committee for initial approval and recommendation to the board, and then the board votes to approve the 2 applicants that get submitted to the COC, and the COC lead has to submit paperwork to the state to say these are our 2 approved applicants. And so are we talking about doing it the same way? And are we doing that? I'm sorry if I missed something that you said, Veronica, because I got distracted for a second.
So I didn't even
because
get
our next
into
COC
the
meeting
detail.
on the 18th, and then if the ESG applications are due on the 19th, that's a super tight turnaround thing to make things happen.
Okay, well, this is the first meeting that we've had since the award was announced.
For
So
sure.
this is the first opportunity I've had. And all of those same steps are still going to be required. So I understand that we really do have a tight turnaround for that.
I'm talking about the turnaround from the 18th to the 19th. So if applications are due on the 19th of October and the board can't, are we going to wait until the COC meeting on the 18th to have the board approve the 2 applicants?
So what I'd like to do is create an ad hoc committee that will figure all of that out. And we'll probably have to call a special board.
Okay, sorry, I missed that. Okay.
I think this funding source is frustrating because this has happened before. It seems to be the thing that they do is that this process is, I think, overly onerous for the amount of money that's available and has these like really intense deadlines. So I agree with Veronica. I think we're going to have to end up having a special board meeting just to approve the rating and ranking, whatever comes out of the ad hoc. So it is irritating for those of you that I think typically apply for these funds.
Brian,
have to go through this.
Just a quick question. Don't know if we've got an answer now. Typically, we only have 2 agencies, RCS and Mendocino Coast, apply for ESG funds. With ESG-CV, we have multiple agencies moving into the ESG funded activities for the first time. So are we anticipating to only have 2 agencies still applying for general ESG funds, or are agencies that are getting ESG-CV funding anticipating kind of throwing their hat in the ring to continue whatever activities they're doing with CV more long-term? I don't know that we have an answer, but it's something to consider.
I don't think, Brian, that we can weigh in on that. I think if an agency wants to apply for ESG, that's going to be their choice. And then the process, the rating and ranking process will have to happen as it has always. So I'm not sure if it's appropriate to, I'm not sure if it's appropriate for the COC to weigh in on whether or not they think people should apply for a competitive grant.
no, it needs to be.
Not so much asking.
I don't think that's what you were asking. I'm just heading it off in case people start going that way.
Bringing up that we might be looking at a new ESG scenario for the first time if that situation occurs, and we've never experienced that in my history.
I agree, we might.
Veronica, what do you need from us as the chairs?
I need either 1 or 2 ad hoc committees created to rate and rank and make these applications and make a recommendation to the COC board.
We'll create 1 ad hoc committee to rate and rank these things.
Yeah.
And if
volunteer?
I'll do it because I know we're not applying for it.
I hate to volunteer her, but no, I'm kidding. Senya at MCHC has done this a couple times, I think, hasn't she, Veronica?
Yes.
So I think this is such an awkward process. There is some value in people who have experience with it doing it.
Wow.
And just as a reminder, if you plan to apply, you cannot be part of this committee.
Right.
And Brian and Sage, you put your hands up. Did you guys have anything?
Sage, you have a question?
I wanted to volunteer for that ad hoc as staff support. A lot of that ESG ranking, it asks very specific HMI outcomes and questions. So just making sure I'm there to provide those answers. I'm committed to that.
Thanks, Brian.
I'll include you in everything.
Oh, I've been on that committee before. I could volunteer. I mean, usually just particularly with just 2 applications. Or,
Thank you.
or however many are going to come in.
So Judy, there's a special domestic violence bonus project that's available through the COC program. And it's for, I think it's case management services. So you guys, there's funding that you guys are eligible for.
Would that
No.
preclude her from being on the ad hoc though, Veronica, since it is a special set
Yes,
aside?
because they're literally creating the policies and procedures that are going to rate and rank those applications. So you can't create the policies and procedures that are used for your application.
That makes sense.
Volunteering?
Well, okay, so I'll just say that right now, our agency is in a state of such fluctuation that I can't imagine that we have any administrative help to even apply for that right now.
Okay. Hear you, Judy.
Yeah.
I was like, please, no one make us apply for any more funding.
Yeah, right, exactly.
You're in good company. There's a lot of us in that deep hole.
we are in such a, I can't even tell you, we don't have a post director, our other directors leaving, we don't have any staff. I mean, it's just like, hello, I'm here. And wanting to go out the back door, so.
Grace?
I'm just volunteering to help.
All right. Thank you, Grace.
Sure.
Judy, I completely feel you. I'm in the same spot. So.
God.
So
I'm not going to volunteer because we're submitting, but I have a question or 2, and one around just kind of with the ESG and how quickly the turnaround happens. Is it possible for the COC board to empower the committee to rate and rank and make a decision on which 2 to move forward, or does that vote need to come back to the full board?
It needs to come back to the full board.
Okay. I was just checking if there was a way to streamline the process a little bit. And then my second question would be, for the ESG application, do you have a timeline yet, Veronica, for what day it's due to the COC for review?
No, I was gonna create that in the next few days. I haven't created it yet.
Did you say next few weeks or next few days?
Days.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
My suggestion though, of course, Sage, and you know this, is that anyone who's planning on applying should start preparing their application.
I know.
I know. This process is so weird. I don't like it at all.
Important. Deadlines are important for me. They help me prioritize the many things that
We should pretend it's due next week.
Pretend it's due the end of this month.
Yeah. You know what? That's probably good. September 30th.
And applications, you can start working on them now in eCivis.
Sage wants us to tell us that she has to work on it tomorrow.
Don't expect it to be any later than September 30th, Sage. Because we're going to have to rate rank it and have a special meeting, so. Any other questions for Veronica? And you don't need anything else from the chairs, do you, Veronica, on this?
No, that's all I need, and I don't have any action items on those 2 topics or any topics. So I'm going to move on to the next one, and that is HEAP, the Homeless Emergency Aid Program. I am very proud to report that we have successfully expended 100% of the grant funds. We used it all, and we're getting working on an internal transfer of the balance of the interest from that bucket, that bucket part of the budget over into HomeKey. And as soon as that's finished, we're going to complete our final report and be done. Any questions on HEAP?
Does that mean that the housing project on the coast, the funds to purchase that land, is that part of what went through?
Yes.
Yay! So eventually we'll have more permanent housing for our folks on the coast?
Yes.
Are we talking about the
And it's
Danco
also-
project?
Yay!
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
Veronica, it would be nice to have someone from the city give us an update on that sometime soon.
I'm
Yeah, I
very
can reach
excited
out
about that. I wasn't sure what the status was. So it's really good to hear that got done.
Yeah. And it also funded portion of Oak Creek. I don't think they've moved quite into that. You're not leasing that up yet, Dan, are you?
No, we won't be leasing it up until probably June of next year.
Okay. And I don't have any report or updates on CASH or the HMIS capacity building grant, but I did want to share that HAP Round 3 funds have been announced by the state. Applications aren't going to be coming out for a few months, but I do have a form I have to submit stating that we intend to apply for funds. So I know the COC wants to apply, so I'm going to work on that.
Can we use the same one we did last time?
Say that again?
We had to use one for round 2, didn't we? That we intend to apply for funds?
Yeah, I think so. I think that early on there was, after round 1 came out, they said, do you want round 2 funding? And we had to say yes. So
I remember
they're doing-
signing that. That's the reason I said that.
Okay, there's so many forms with HAP, I can't even keep track. So that'll be coming out soon. And one of the things, as I shared under the strategic planning committee update, that we're looking at is forming that collaboration work group with the COC and county to decide if we could potentially apply for round 3 together and only have one grant application and one set of reports and one set of contracts instead of doubling everything up. But we'll see how that goes.
We'll see how successful that one is after I tried to do that the first time.
So Dan, have you heard from Dan Jurdy on any of it? I mean, Dan for a while was really anxious to work with us. I don't want to leave him out.
No, I can reach out to him, but I haven't talked to Dan for a while.
Okay.
I will say from the County Board of Supervisors perspective, they had an ad hoc committee on homelessness that was Dan and John, and they disbanded that without,
right.
They disbanded it last December or something.
Right.
Without resurrecting it, but I don't, at this point, things are getting very intense and wild in the homelessness world, like even nationally. So I would be surprised if there's not some interest in engaging. I just don't know what the vehicle will be yet. But we need to push them, and I will carry that message that we're going to have to figure out who is on the other side of the partnership between the COC and the county, like who's going to hold that ball.
Yeah, Dan and I met with John and Jurdy several times, and so I just felt like Jurdy was sincere in in some stuff. But this was in the worried part about the Danco thing too. Everybody relaxed now, but I just didn't want to leave out interested, concerned folks.
I think that's super valid. And I think, some of the longstanding kind of coastal inland valley issues are still there. And so it's good to get that whole, it would be good to have that represented.
Yeah.
That's all the funding updates I have.
Thank you, Veronica. Sage, do you have an update on the 100-day challenge? 100-day challenge?
I have way less of me talking and way more of a presentation to show you. So the 100-day challenge team had the challenge ended on August 31st. They had a sustainability workshop 2 weeks ago, almost 2 weeks ago, where they met with the rest of the cohort across California that participated in this 100-day challenge. The challenge, of course, was focused on those people who were in Project Roomkey and also in non-congregate care through hotels, through CalWorks. And so Mendocino County's goal was around connecting those people in Project Roomkey and those CalWorks non-congregate shelter folks to permanent or stable housing, or a place to exit that wasn't the street when they had to leave Project Roomkey. They learned a lot through their doing this challenge. I was able to do these interviews with everybody, with most of the folks on the team. So it's folks from Manzanita and McCabe and Hospitality Center and the county and a bunch of different organizations that all worked on this initiative. The work is continuing, so this team is continuing to meet and do work on this as Project Roomkey. It miraculously is still open. We thought that Roomkey was going to come to an end on August 31st, and there was they had the ability to keep it going at least through, it sounds like maybe November, but it will be coming to an end, which means that this team still has work to do, and they're really dedicated to that work. It's been really amazing seeing the output of energy and just the teamwork coming together. So I did say less of me talking, more of this presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to this video, but Megan, it looks like you might want to add something before I turn it to the video.
No,
oh,
whatever it was, it's gone if it was.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. No, I can't remember. So it couldn't have been very important.
Okay.
I just want to mention that all the cohorts or the communities present had a video similar to this, and Sage created this video, and this is the only one that actually included people with lived experience and their feedback. Sage, you did an amazing job.
Thank you. Okay. Can you all see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay, good.
We got off to kind of a rocky start. We were all trying to navigate our roles in our Mendocino cohort and figure out what each person was going to be doing that would make it useful for the other team members. So but then once we kind of got into the groove of things, I felt like we gained some pretty good partnerships with each other.
I'm new to all of this. I mean, the 100 challenge seemed to coincide with my starting and onboarding for the county. So I've learned a lot just through this process and the increased communication between all the agencies. So in addition to our normal meetings, having this meeting's been really helpful for me to understand the processes that occur across housing navigation.
The biggest challenge has just been this pandemic.
So we definitely have a resource problem in our community. Not only housing resources, but really support on the ground staff. I think COVID has really put a damper on our ability to provide the services that we're designed to provide.
When there is available housing, there's so many applicants, as well as the landlords have a major
opinion about homeless people. So it's really hard to try and root for these homeless people when, they are being judged right off the bat just for being homeless.
Before you were in the hotel while you were staying on the street, what was that like for you, especially after this pandemic started?
It was kind of rough. It was like keeping warm at night, and it's like I've been having major issues with my feet. So it was like it got to the point where I was on the streets and I just admitted myself into the hospital.
They don't want to ask for help. They have a lot of shame or a lot of guilt around how they got into that situation, and they don't want to tell their story. And
I've never ever asked for help. I mean, it was hard for me to even ask for unemployment.
We don't always know where the funding is. I've been learning, we're trying as a community to share that information, but that still becomes a little bit of a barrier. We still make referrals to places that actually don't have stuff available, but we don't know that.
I think a common one is funding restrictions, how funding can be utilized, and really trying to find what specifically works for that client. Sometimes that can become a barrier.
When you get multiple people together in a room who are all very protective of their clients, they can become competitive. Mm-hmm. And so I think one of the first barriers that we had to address and break down was figuring out that we were all there to help each other.
There's healing that happens through the 100-day challenge, right?
It was a life changer. It's like it kept me from drinking. It's like then I just got into going out to meetings and all that kind of stuff.
A lot of times, with the strategic plan, it takes a long time to put into action. And with the 100-day challenge, we kind of hit the ground running. And I think we learned together that we can be highly effective in a short amount of time when we do have that high level of communication happening.
Because no one agency can do it. So the 100-day challenge for me is like, okay, here's all the resources. Let's throw them all in a pile and let's take them as we need them for this population, for these particular people, and see if we can serve as many as possible.
At the same time, it's really awesome that we were able to pull together and collaborate and work kind of as a team.
Wonderful to be able to have a group of folks that are all doing the same work come together.
Regular, ongoing peer support in the community is important at all levels.
Landlord engagement is something that we did as, individuals. We would go out, Tony would go out, or Jen would go out, or, Joanne, or, Joe, or somebody would go out and engage with landlords. We as a group are doing flyers and, full-on landlord engagement.
What I love the most about it is that we're all focused on the same goal. And so there's a real intense effort and consistent effort to see how everybody's expertise can come together to really solve a problem.
When we think about success, a lot of times we think about numbers. And because I've been a large back end on the data side of this, I know that our numbers are not super positive. And that's a lot of the time because we haven't been able to successfully house people during this time of COVID and during this time of wildfires and everything else that we've had going on. However, what we were able to do is really build off of the opportunity to utilize the emergency housing vouchers. And from what I've heard, our community has really outdone ourselves with the number of housing voucher referrals that we were able to put in, almost 300 from what I heard recently.
I've actually got myself a little studio apartment. It's really nice. The first time I've had TV and internet and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of fun to play with.
That folks having struggles on the streets with different barriers, it's almost impossible to overcome these barriers without housing. And if we could see housing as healthcare, I think that we could be more successful.
We as leaders in leadership positions need to be very cognizant of the fact that everyone is a leader. Everyone's a leader and everyone's doing their work. And I don't know from my vantage what's going to be most effective in someone else's position.
And then ask the people doing the work how you can support.
What we've seen in this challenge is that when they were in the room, it was harder for the direct service providers on the team to feel empowered and safe taking risks.
Great people at the top of the, who kind of represent our macro environment here, who understand the plight and really want to advocate for us as the people on the ground.
I would hope we all kind of just stay at the same pace where we are, what we're doing, because I think we're each growing and our team is getting stronger. And like I said before, like the not having any competition and actually working together for the same end result it feels really good. I mean,
this community can do a lot more than we think we can when we work together.
I think we should target populations more often.
Our number one thing is really those relationships with the landlords. And in order to maintain those relationships with the landlords, we have to maintain client care afterwards. We can't just check the box, they're housed, and move on to the next person.
I really liked sharing the information. If that's we were trying to share information a lot, and we came up with all these different platforms to share information through this.
Moving forward toward those long-term goals of, agency and care. Just people having their own autonomy, but being taken care of by their community at the same time.
If we can trust that there's going to be enough, and we show up with a generous spirit, and I see that on the team, and I think because I've been doing this a while, I've seen a lot of growth over the time where we're not kind of holding our resources like, oh, that's mine, I don't want to share it because there's so few. I think that's the biggest part that I've really loved seeing as I've stepped into this role with the 100-Day Challenge.
The only way we're going to solve the homeless problem is by housing them.
I've loved getting to know the other community members. Tony Marsh and Joanne have really reached out and helped me with things. Tabitha on the coast, I've sent people to her that I can't get to. And I didn't know any of those people until we started meeting for the 100-Day Challenge. And so that to me has been really, really helpful and a really great experience. Just to get, you can feel how much people want to help and help our participants. So I really like that.
I just gotta thank the Compass program. I mean, they've stuck it out with me. They didn't just say, just say here it is and take off. So we've become quite good friends.
Very appreciative to everybody who participated. Very, very much for their collaboration, for their skills, for their information, for just being there for us to end homelessness and do our best. Working together and getting to know other people in the community. This was pretty awesome.
Well, thank you guys for letting me share that. And the team is pretty proud of the work that they've done and that they're going to continue to do. And so we'll keep bringing updates to the COC about what they're up to.
Thank you, Sage.
Well done, you all. That was very, very inspirational.
Yay.
Really good.
So the next full membership meeting is going to be October 18th. There will be a special meeting between now and the 18th. So in October, we most likely will have 2 meetings, just FYI. So make sure you keep the 11th open.
So I made a mistake on the agenda and I forgot to change full membership meeting to board meeting. The October 18th meeting will be a board meeting.
When's our next full membership meeting? Because we won't be able to fix your governance thing until we do that.
December usually, but that one gets canceled, so it's usually January.
We might have to, we'll have to talk about having one prior to that.
Okay.
Okay, but everybody keep their 11th open as well, please, of October. Okay, if there's nothing else.